Welcome everybody to a look at 2022 as a year in film in terms of what I watched, and yeah, it was a fantastic year 2022 overall. Watched a whole load of films. You can see watched 700 in total, which yeah, it's not the largest amount of films I've watched in any given year, but it's certainly one of the highest, and yeah, that resulted in 1,132.9 hours watched. So yeah, we're going to just quickly go through this as yeah, there's a lot to go through. So yeah, this is quickly my top 20 for the year 2022. So yeah, overall a really good 2022 in terms of new films. As yeah, plenty of sequels that were really rather good, but on the whole it's mostly non-sequels that dominate the top 10. With only Glass Onion being really the only sequel there. I guess you could say Batman is a sequel in some regards, but it's not really. So yeah, and yeah, that's the average kind of films that I watched. So 700 in total, 58.3 on average every month, and 13.5 on average every week, with the last week of the year being the most watched week, so with 20, compared to the 10th to the 16th of 18, and the 23rd of July to the 29th of July with 19. So yeah, and unsurprisingly, the days off that I usually, well, the days I usually have off from work are the most watched. 137 on Saturdays and 141 films watched on Sundays. So yeah, with Monday 110 not far behind. So yeah, the first film I watched of the year was The Invisible Target, which was a really rather good Hong Kong action film. And the last film I watched of the year was House, a Japanese horror film, which is really weird. So yeah, I highly recommend both of those. And yeah, we'll get to my favourite pre-2022 first time viewing soon, but that's my top 20 overall, which again, fantastic top 20 there. And then the genres and the countries and the languages, as per usual, UK, US and English are at the top. Thriller, horror and drama are my top three genres, but there are sometimes crossovers between the two, as you do sometimes get drama and thriller being both, quite frankly, as well as like so thriller and action or action and crime. So yeah, there is crossover. Obviously there's a lot there, so obviously there's a lot more genres there than I have actually watched, with fantasy being the bottom of the top 10. Mexico is my bottom of my top 10 in terms of countries, and Russian is bottom of the top 10 in terms of languages. Yeah, I only watched 2 films actually with Russian there. Then in terms of breakdowns, well, I watched 11% of the films I watched in 2022 were from 2022, so 77 of the 100. Pretty good overall. I think that's one of the better percentages that I've had between the given year that of watching films and older films. Then watches and rewatches, 84.9% of films that I watched were new and first time watches, which yeah is stupidly high, quite frankly, and it would be even higher if I hadn't watched all of the James Bond films at the cinema. That's 25 when it's right on right. So yeah, and then 97.9% of films I watch I reviewed. The 15 that I didn't, purely because I didn't really have anything else to say about them. So yeah, and then in terms of ratings, there's very few I actually hated in terms of films. Only one I gave half a star, only 3 I gave 1 star, only 8 that I gave 1.5 stars, and only 14 that I gave 2 stars. I consider a film that's 2.5 out of 5 to be just about average, and then 3 stars is above average. So yeah, overall a really rather solid rating spread. Not many 5-star films though, only 15, but at the end of the day that is better than, you know, none at all, I guess. So yeah, and the 15 that I watched, most of them, as you can see, are rewatches. Only 4 are not, and 2 of those are from this 2022, and 2 of them were not. So yeah, a lot of rewatches, several of them because they were released in the cinema, like the James Bond films, and the likes of RoboCop, which has also given a re-release. So yeah, that's why. And then we move down to the stars of the films, and yeah, Peter Cushing well and truly does deserve this first place, because not only does he have 19 films watched, but only 2 of those were re-watches, so 17 in total first time watches, which yeah, it's pretty high, no doubt about that. Most of them are because of Hammer Horror. You know, you got your Frankenstein films, but you've also got the 2 Dalek films, and yeah, but yeah, mostly Hammer Horror, but that's Twins of Evil and Devil's Men, I think, was Night of the Big Heat as well. Asylum and Tales from the Crypt were Amica Productions, I think it's called. So yeah, that's why. Dennis Mullen, all 17 of his films were rewatches because all 17 of them are the James Bond films. Easily the actor that's been in the James Bond films the most, and will be until that series actually finally ends. So yeah, because no one's going to do more than 17. And yeah, Basil Rathbone was inferred purely because of the Sherlock Holmes series. Obviously a couple in there are not from that series, but yeah, only 3 of those 15 are not. So yeah, bonkers series, that Sherlock Holmes series, just because of how long it was, 15 films in total, or 14. Nigel Bruce also starred alongside Basil Rathbone as Watson, sorry, and yeah, that's why he's there, purely because of those films. And then you've got several other stars from the James Bond series: Lawrence Maxwell, Bernard Lee, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Walter Gottel, and Jeffrey Keane. All of those were in the Bond series at some point or another. And then directors, well, Roy William Neill again is purely in there because of the Sherlock Holmes series. All 11 of those. The only one he didn't, there was only 1 or 2 that he didn't direct. Then you got Richard Fleischer. Most of his were first time watches as well. In fact, all of his were. Forgot about that. But yeah, mostly really rather good films. Only really Trapped and Amityville 3D were the underwhelming efforts there. And then Jean-Pierre Melville. All new watches, all but 1 of 4 stars or more, and 3 of those are 4.5 or more. So yeah, he's a fantastic director. Highly recommend watching his films if you haven't already. Then you got the likes of Umberto Lenzi, Jackie Chan, Lewis Gilbert. Lewis Gilbert and John Glenn are in there because of the Bond films. 3 of Lewis Gilbert's films were James Bond films, and all 5 of John Glenn's were James Bond films. So yeah, that's why. Same goes for Guy Hamilton. I'm pretty sure all those were James Bond films. Yep, all 4 of those. Second most prolific director of the Bond films after John Glenn. And yeah, then you've got to move on to the crew in the studio. So yeah, it's always really interesting to look at these because sometimes you just do not realise how many films some of these people actually were involved in. Take Leslie I. Carey, for instance, who I've seen 16 films from last year, but in total he did 207, and I've only seen 27 of them. So yeah, you just don't realise how well and truly involved some of the background crew are involved in films, and how many. So yeah, it's ridiculous, quite frankly. But yeah, my most watched composer, John Barry, again because of the James Bond series. There was only 2 that weren't the James Bond series that I had seen from him that had his score involved. Jerry Goldsmith, then, I'd say is probably the most prolific score composer, because yeah, I did see 5 of his that I had already seen, but that leaves 7 that I hadn't. So yeah, pretty good on that regard. Universal Studio Pictures, comfortably the most watched studio, again because of their horror efforts from the 30s and 40s, pretty much. Because as you can see, also the Sherlock Holmes series, which bumped it up by 12. Then The Swimmer was my most liked review, 6 likes. Thank you everyone who did like that one. Great film, highly recommend watching it. It's another fantastic effort from Indicator. Then the highs and the lows. So the highest average was 4.4 for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Lowest average was the Amityville Curse. Most popularly reviewed film on the site was The Batman. And most obscure was The Girl in the Picture, which only had 55 ratings as of this video. So yeah, not very many. And finally, my world map. So some of this was with crossover, as you will have some films that are filmed in several different countries. I've seen films with at least 8 countries at times that they've been shot in, purely because of production or because it's the stories across so many different countries. So yeah, so there is some crossover with some films, but as per usual, the US, UK, and a few other European countries like France, Germany, plus Canada dominate that chart. Hong Kong does as well. If we zoom all the way in, where is it? There we go, Hong Kong 28. So that's more than Canada, more than Germany, which just shows how many of those impressive Hong Kong martial arts films I watched. So yeah, it's 2022 as a whole. Worst 3 films that I watched were Firestarter, which I gave 1 star. Morbius I gave 1.5, and Black Lighthouse I gave 1.5. Liam Neeson responsible for 2 of my worst top 5 films. Master is my second least favourite horror film of the year, but Uma isn't much better either. Least favourite 3-star film again was Ambulance, Michael Bay's, I would say, resurgence, but then again he's not exactly had any resurgence at all since The Rock, as yeah, that was his best and he's pretty much nosedived ever since. But yeah, overall, a fantastic film for films overall. Top 50 is where it's really interesting though, as you got Resurrection, which has a great performance by Rebecca Hall. Then you got Dark Glasses, which is the newest Dario Argento film I've ever seen from him. You have to go all the way to 1990, I think, to see his next film that I've seen from him. So yeah, and that was pretty good. Halloween Ends, far better than some people would give it credit for. Troll was really, really fun. Basically a Norwegian kaiju film. And then you scoot up into the top 25. Prey, Pearl, Violent Night, one of the best cinema going screenings I've seen in 2022 was Violent Night. Really fun audience and yeah, really fun film to go with it. But yeah, top 10 overall is where it's really at. Only one sequel, like I said earlier. Some people will argue with the Batman is a sequel, but I don't. But yeah, Glass Onion is the only really technical sequel there. But yeah, Bad Guys, my favourite animation of the year. Then you got The Northman and The Woman King, and All Quiet on the Western Front, the 3 period set films. Excellent all round. Barbarian, second favourite horror film of the year, although it's my favourite pure horror film of the year. Banshees of Inisherin, really well good comedy drama. Nope, sci-fi horror, which is why I say Barbarian is my favourite pure horror, because it literally is just horror, whereas Nope has sci-fi elements to it. Then Everything Everywhere at Once, and then The Batman. So yeah, and 2022 is fantastic. Was fantastic. And then in terms of new first-time watches from before the year 2022, it was great. No doubt about that at all. You've got a huge variety of films. You've got your westerns, you've got your samurai films, you've got your film noirs, dramas, you've got your Christmas comedy films, you've got giallo, you've got documentary, you've got your film noirs, you've got your comedy mystery films like Memories of Murder, Land of Mine, which is probably one of the most tense films I've ever seen. Then you got moving up to your animation like Felidae, Mitchells and the Machines versus the Machines, Luca. They were all 3 of those were great. I guess you could say, yeah, Luca was my favourite animated film of the year. And yes, it took me until 2022 to finally get around to watching E.T. But I think I saved it for the right time, because we did release it in the cinema for its 40th anniversary. And yeah, it was absolutely glorious to see that at the cinema. Then you got Ichiyoji Temple, which is my favourite sequel of the year. Yeah, that's easily the best of the 3 of those samurai films. Then you got Brother, which was really rather excellent. Big surprise from that film from Russia, celebrating its 25th anniversary in 2022. Then you got 2 war films. You got Between Heaven and Hell and Cross of Iron. Cross of Iron is just spectacular in terms of its production value. Then you got Le Demi Soufflé, which is by Jean-Pierre Melville. Then 2 Humphrey Bogart films, The Harder They Fall and The Desperate Hours. Then a pair of Jackie Chan films, Crime Story, Police Story, both excellent in terms of their action. Then you got White Dog, one of the later films from Samuel Fuller, and even though it's in his 3rd or 4th decade in terms of directing, absolutely stonking film. Brief Encounter, really rather nicely done classic romance film. And then finally Army of Shadows, another war film, but less centered on war and more on espionage and spies and getting captured by the enemy and the like. And yeah, absolutely brilliant. And again, that was also from Jean-Pierre Melville. So yeah, overall a fantastic film. Yeah, quite frankly. And yeah, I really hope your year was also as excellent as mine was, or even better. As yeah, 2022, amazing year for new films and old films. And yeah, here's hoping that 2023 will be just as good. So yeah, I'd like to hear what your top 10 films of the year were, or any films that you recommend that you saw during 2022, because I'm always interested in finding new films. But yeah, nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.